Set expectations up front. I have neither been authorized to give you any free hardware, nor do I have an adorable animal coming out. So I just want to say that right now to make sure, despite us being in this big room, that will not be happening. But what you are going to hear is some honest talk about our responsibilities and how we're living up to it. So hopefully that's just as exciting as getting a free Oculus Go. As Jay said, my name's Alex. I work on security at Facebook. I am excited to be here today to talk about how we approach security at Facebook and our responsibility to the world and to the community on our platforms. Facebook builds products that bring people closer together. And you heard Mark this morning talk very eloquently about all of the positive benefits that can bring to people around the world, connecting people who might never be connected before, giving voice to people who have been voiceless. Those incredible positive benefits, though, obviously also have risks. If you ever come and visit our office, you'll see pictures like this all over the place. This is a graphic demonstrating the growth of the Facebook network over the last several years. You'll see there's no lines on the map. Each dot is now representative of thousands or perhaps even millions of people, and each of those lines is a connection between people. And you'll see this all over the place at Facebook. You see it on people's desktops on their laptops. You see it on posters. It's actually the background when our video conferencing system is idle. And it's meant to be something that's inspiring. It is inspiring. It's inspiring to see what mankind can do, that we can bring and connect all these people together who have never been connected before. But when you look at this, you also have to be humbled by the risk and the responsibility that we're taking on. Each one of those little lines can be a positive connection, but it can also be something that is abused to cause harm. And that's one of the things that we are dealing with right now, and one of the reasons we are investing in lots and lots of teams and technology to deal with these issues is because when we look at this, we don't only see all of the positive benefits, but we also have to see the issues that we have to deal with. Another thing that we're dealing with in the security world at Facebook is keeping pace with the corporate roadmap. You'll see this slide multiple times at F8, the 10-year roadmap. And if you look at those things at the right, they are incredibly ambitious areas of technological research for which the security models and safety models have yet to be defined. So when you think about connectivity, it is a wonderful thing to bring connectivity to people around the world who have never had it. You also have to think of what are the safety impacts of that alongside of the technical security issues with the kind of technology that we use to bring connectivity. When you think about artificial intelligence, you have to think about bias. You have to think about risk. You have to think about how you're training AI and what kind of impact it'll happen on people. When you think of virtual reality, you've got to think about not just the great fun things you can do with it, but what is safety in a virtual reality world? What is abuse? How are we going to detect those things and deal with them at scale when there is no examples for us to build upon? And so today I want to talk a little bit about not just what we're doing now, but how we're thinking about these things going forward. For those of you who don't know me, I actually come from a pretty traditional information security background. I come from the offensive security research world. I started my time in this career getting in trouble with a 300 baud modem and a Commodore 64. And then after college, I worked for a number of companies who did offensive security research. I was proud to be a co-founder of a company that helped break systems and then tell people how to fix them, and then also worked on incident response and understanding what bad things had happened. And so because of that background, I am really comfortable with the kind of traditional information security responsibilities we have at Facebook. Namely, those are our responsibility to protect the company and our corporate systems, our responsibility to protect our production systems and the user data they hold, and our responsibility to ship secure products. These are the traditional pillars of a cybersecurity or information security career. Now, clearly, all of these areas are still critical for us. Protecting people's data and all the technical work that goes into that is extremely important and something we'll talk about today. But it turns out that doing that is not enough. And I think my personal path here is actually echoed by Facebook overall, in that I personally and the company overall has had to adjust to understand that security is more than building secure, trustworthy systems. Security is understanding how technology can be abused in the real world to cause harm. Over the last 3 years as the CSO here, I've been really honored to meet some incredible people. I've been able to meet with government election bodies who are trying to protect their elections from external interference. I've been honored to be around people who have dedicated their professional careers to protecting children online at places like the Crimes Against Children conference in Dallas. I've been able to go to Africa and meet with NGOs who are promoting civil society and democracy. And when you meet with these people, you realize that the issues they are dealing with are sometimes traditional security issues, the kind of things that we've been dealing with for decades. But a lot of it is the technically correct use of our products to cause harm. And it has become really clear to me and to us overall that we could build technically perfect, totally secure products, and still bad things would happen. Because there are people who are going to want to use products that connect the world up to do harmful things. And that is something that we have to focus on as well. So today, I'm going to talk about both these areas. We're going to talk about our efforts to protect the company and the products we ship. We're going to talk about protecting people. And then I want to talk about how in both of these goals, we can do better by working better with the overall community. So first, let's talk about how we protect the company and products, the traditional role of information security. There are a bunch of different teams who work on this, and I can't really represent them all. I'm honored up here to be able to represent some of their work. And here's a description of some of the functional areas that we have working on security. I'll go over them really briefly. So there's people who work on corporate security. This is the traditional information security challenge that really every company in the world faces. Our challenge is a little bit bigger because we have some of the best adversaries in the world trying to break into our corporate networks. But in the end, it's not that different than the kind of things you hear from CISOs at lots of companies. We need to think about identity management and access control. We have to do vulnerability management. We have to build secure internal portals and systems that can withstand attack. There's a very large production engineering security component at Facebook. These are the people who secure the actual production servers in our data centers that hold on and that to user data and then provide services. A lot of their work is applying information security ideas at incredible scale. How do you do vulnerability management across a very large number of servers? How do you patch without ever taking your site down? How do you do service authentication and authorization so that if one part of the large ecosystem that is Facebook on the back end is compromised, that compromise does not lead to a large compromise of data? We have a dedicated data security engineering team, and their entire job is to think about how is data accessed and used, how can we protect it, and then something that's surprising to a lot of people that I talk to about this, how to delete data. It turns out when you're dealing with exabyte scale data sets, doing data deletion is actually a really tough technical challenge. Tracking where all the data is, making sure that we're living up to the promises that we make users and regulators, that is the job of a dedicated engineering team. We have a dedicated detection engineering team, so their job is to build the systems that look for anomalies on our network, that alert us and then allow our incident responders and our investigators to move in behind to find and stop security incidents very quickly. We have risk management teams. They do kind of traditional information security compliance work, as well as some really interesting stuff around vendor risk management and permission management, which for us is a very critical thing. And then we have a product security team. And these are the folks that work with the product teams to make sure they ship secure products. And since this is a developer conference, that's actually the area I'd love to dive into a little bit more, because hopefully some of the things that we've learned over the last several years on product security will be useful for you to take back to your companies. Traditionally, application security or product security has been something that you add to the end of a product lifecycle. In the traditional waterfall model of software development, back in the day, people would just put a little thing at the end saying, add security here, right before shipping, right? And that has become clearly not how we can do security anymore. One, people don't develop with waterfall models, but security needs to be something that has to be built in from the beginning. And that's something that we've really taken to heart, not just in how we build technology, but how we build the teams that build technology. So this starts with boot camp. All of our engineers, in fact, all of our technical employees, go through a 6 to 8 week boot camp. I had to do this. It was a lot of fun keeping up with the 24-year-olds, as you can imagine. And in that boot camp, we have dedicated security engineering classes, as well as a security curriculum that is built in to all the classes that teach our engineers how do they build software the Facebook way. One of the things they are taught is that we provide secure libraries that do the most security-sensitive functions for them, that have been highly tested, and that they are required to use in any of those situations that are traditionally dangerous. Direct access to a database doesn't happen at Facebook. If you're going to composite together data that comes from a bunch of different users in a web page, that's the kind of thing that we have pre-built libraries that we ask people to use. The idea of peer-reviewed and feedback is built really deeply into our development lifecycle and the culture of how we build engineering and software. Every piece of code is peer-reviewed and checked off before it finally makes it to production. And then there are special reviews for code that is especially security sensitive. And then we back that up through automated testing of our code to make sure we haven't made obvious mistakes and that people are doing the kinds of things that we know can reduce the flaw count in complex pieces of software. That includes static analysis, semantic analysis. There's a dedicated engineering team that does a lot of really great deep computer science language security work to apply the best knowledge from academia to our systems internally. As I said, the security has to be built in deeply into your development cycle, and that has definitely been true for us over the last couple of years as we've transitioned to a continuous integration, continuous deployment model. CI/CD is a software development model that is usually associated with smaller startups, but it has a lot of benefits at scale in that it allows us to iterate our products really quickly. And it also has security benefits in that it allows us to patch our systems very, very fast. In CI/CD, code that is checked in goes through a variety of automated processes and then automatically makes it out into production without a manual merge or release step. And so that sounds really scary from a security perspective because there isn't a specific place where it's really easy to plug security testing in, and that's true. And then that's why we have to build that security testing into a variety of components, parts of the overall lifecycle, and then enforce it through tooling. One of the tools that we've created is a tool called Fabricator. It is a system that helps us coordinate all of the patches that are flowing through our systems, make sure they get code reviewed, make sure that the proper tools and tests have run against them. It's something we've open sourced too. And I do recommend for those of you at smaller companies, thinking about developer tooling and making sure security is supported by your developer tooling lifecycle is actually a really important investment to do earlier because it makes it much easier than trying to retrofit that kind of security testing later in the lifecycle of a company. We also operate one of the world's largest bug bounty programs. We've paid out over $6 million to people who have responsively reported flaws to us over the last 6 years. Now, bug bounties are a great thing for multiple reasons. It's a great final check to make sure that flaws that make it through this whole cycle and make it into production are caught quickly. It's great for us to encourage responsible security research practices, and I like doing that. One of the things that makes me really excited about bug bounties is it gives an opportunity to people who otherwise might not have it to be part of the information security industry. And it gives us access to talent that we might never meet. We have several people on our product security team whom don't come from the kind of schools that Silicon Valley traditionally recruits from, who perhaps do not have the kind of backgrounds that we often run into, but who are able to prove their mettle by finding bugs, documenting them well, interacting with us in a professional manner. And those people got paid out these large bounties, like in the $30,000 range, and then they were offered jobs once they were ready for it. And that has been a great way for us to reach out and to meet new people that, again, otherwise we probably wouldn't run into. Part of doing security at a company as Facebook is also then figuring out these processes that you build centrally, how do they apply to all of your different product lines? So these different products at Facebook actually have widely divergent security properties from what we call the Big Blue app, or Facebook.com, the main Facebook application. For example, you heard today about us releasing the Oculus Go. So Oculus Go is a virtual reality headset. It's also a small computer strapped to your face. And that means it ships with its own operating system. It ships with a mobile app store. Those things have very different security properties than a web application or a mobile social network like we normally build. And so it's really important for us to build a security team that has the flexibility to take that into account. And one of the key things we do is we have this thing called the Security Partners Program, where we embed people in all of the different product teams to be representatives of the security team and to understand how we can adapt what we have learned centrally to the specific needs of these products and users. Another great example is WhatsApp on the safety side. WhatsApp, as you've heard multiple times this morning, is end-to-end encrypted. None of the content is visible to us. The security and anti-abuse, anti-spam work that we do on WhatsApp has to be very different than what we can do on Facebook or Messenger. And that's the kind of thing that we have the security partners to work together with those engineers and those product designers to try to think about going forward how we can do a better job of adapting ourselves to very specific needs. If you're interested in product security overall, I strongly recommend you go see this talk by Chris Clark today. He's one of our product security managers up in the Seattle office, old friend of mine. He's going to do a really great talk that goes much deeper into product security. One of the areas I listed was also corporate security, so I wanted to give a quick shout out to a product that we've created and released open source. We have found sometimes it's better to build open source tools that have great general purpose use than to go purchase really, really specific product solutions. And a great example of that is OSQuery. OSQuery is a small piece of software that we run on every corporate and production system all across the world, deployed on a huge number of machines. And what it does is it allows our production engineers, our security analysts, our software engineers to ask questions of this huge fleet of systems and to get back answers quickly and without affecting the performance of the workloads that are actually running on those systems. And so that has lots of great benefits for running a production network, but it also then obviously has great security benefits. And it is the primary tool we use to look for the signs of potential intrusion on any of our corporate or production systems. And so we built this ourselves, and then we open sourced it, which was fantastic because now there are dozens of companies who are using it and contributing their code back into the repository. It's on GitHub. You can go check it out yourself and contribute if you want. And then also something that's been really fascinating to watch is there is now an entire commercial a set of commercial companies that have grown up around OSQuery. And so you can go buy services that are commercialized, that are professionally maintained and managed, that are built upon OSQuery. And because of the way we've licensed this and released it, we're totally fine with people going and making money by providing good security service on the software that we've put out. And so I definitely recommend for those of you who do full stack work and you're interested in what's going on your servers itself, give OSQuery a shot, join the community, see if you want to contribute back to it. So it's not only important to then build security into your products and networks, but you've got to regularly test it. And that's why we have a dedicated red team at Facebook. What our red team does is, on a normal day-to-day basis, is they work with the product teams to go find security flaws and get them fixed. But then they also, multiple times a year, run unannounced exercises where nobody except a couple of us inside the company knows it's an exercise. And the red team goes and pretends to be a real adversary group that we deal with and breaks into Facebook and tries to go after an objective, whether that's a corporate objective or a production objective, in a way that is indicative of the kinds of attacks that we have seen in the real world. And what this does is it tests our ability to prevent flaws from making it into our systems. It tests our detection systems of whether they detect the indicators that are left behind by the red team. But most importantly, it tests the capability of our incident response and our investigations teams to respond quickly and accurately to a real breach. And so doing this on a regular basis not only keeps our people on their toes, but it comes up with these great learnings that then we can take back and kind of share out in a blame-free manner and talk about how can we continuously improve our security processes. Once these red team exercises are completed, again, these are like real technical simulated intrusions on the network, we take the output of that and then we create realistic scenarios that we can practice with the other teams that are involved in a real security incident. So that's like the legal team, the policy team, the privacy team, the product team, the communications teams. And then we run a tabletop exercise where over a couple of days, we simulate the kinds of things we would do internally to understand and then respond to a real data breach. And this is important, one, because you find out, what processes are missing, whether you need to build tooling to support internal communications. But what you also can do is you can help those teams that don't work on security every day exercise that muscle to understand what is it like to be in the middle of a real security incident. And this is, again, something I really recommend that you guys take back to your companies. It's something that is great for big companies, but really there's no company too small to be doing these exercises. And we do them up to the top levels of our company, where the top executives are getting briefed on this is what happened in the simulation and what recommendation we would have had for you. So I've only been able to touch on a couple of the areas that are involved here, but I do hope you have a better sense of the kinds of things we do to secure the systems and the products that we ship. I want to talk then now a little bit about how we protect people. Protecting people who use our products is a core part of our culture. And I know a lot of people at the company, some colleagues I feel really blessed to be able to work with, who are working at Facebook because they are experts in a certain kind of abuse, and they came to Facebook because they knew this was a place they could have real impact for real people. And again, there are lots of different things going on here. There's a ton of teams working on it, but I do want to try to represent a little bit of the breadth of the work that we're doing around safety. Safety efforts are generally divided into kind of two different categories. There are the people who are working on specific problems, right? So we have a dedicated team on election security. We have a dedicated team on child safety. Then we have the teams that work on specific products or surfaces. So we have the team that works on all kinds of abuse in newsfeed or all kinds of abuse in video. And they work together to understand the problem sets, to measure them. This is the job of researchers and data scientists, to understand what kinds of issues are happening, to think about how we can change the product at a basis level, and then to drive down that abuse until it's at the point of where we feel that we can go no further, which is honestly, probably at no point are we there, but that is our goal, is to drive these numbers to zero, to drive the amount of abuse in these different areas to zero. There are then also intelligence and investigation teams whose job it is to understand what happened in those scenarios where we failed and we were not able to prevent abuse from happening up front. And then we have our community operations team, which is the team of tens of thousands of people who allow us to take these protections and to scale them out to social networks that support billions of people. Because it's a hot topic and I think a lot of people care about it, including myself, I want to dive specifically into what we're doing around election security. I think this is a great topic too because it's really indicative of the class of issues that Facebook is dealing with right now. One of the basic issues we're dealing with is the fact that there is no existing model or playbook for us to follow in some of these areas where there are kinds of abuse, like the misinformation, disinformation is an ancient tactic, but its application to social networks that scale across billions of people, and the responsibilities of those platforms is something that has not been well defined. And so while we have that challenge, we have also decided this does not take us off the hook. I hope that Mark made that very, very clear this morning. And we are working really hard to understand what happened in the US in 2016 and to make sure that doesn't happen again, either in the US or in any of the elections around the world. And so while this is a new area for us, we also have made some pretty good strides in understanding the kinds of issues that exist. And I think the first round of protections that we're rolling out right now are going to do a big part to prevent this kind of abuse from happening again. To protect elections, though, you have to first understand what the attacks against it are. And when we think of attacks against elections that might utilize Facebook's products, we think of three major categories. The first is attacks against knowledge. So this is where most of what people term fake news falls into. Misinformation, disinformation, as well as the amplification of divisive messages that perhaps do not actually count as fake news, but are being amplified well beyond their natural reach through means, technical or other policy violating means. The second category is attacks against the safety of an election. And this often uses techniques that we see in other scenarios: harassment, account takeovers, threats of violence, but uses it in a situation where you're trying to apply that to participants in elections. So those could be voters, those could be candidates, those could be the people who are running the election, working the ref, so to speak, using these kinds of safety harassment. And then the third category is very specific to election security, which is attempts to disenfranchise people to reduce turnout, usually for particular groups, either particular socioeconomic groups, ethnic groups, or groups of voters who believe in, who are going to vote for one side or the other. Now, attacks against turnout can take either of those two first categories. They could be attacks using knowledge. So that's the example of trying to tell people, hey, the polls have closed because it's raining, or you should go to this polling place, or you're going to be arrested if you show up at a poll and you don't have an ID. Or it can be direct threats of violence to try to prevent people from going out and voting. So when we look at these issues, we have to apply a global view, but then we also have to apply a local view. And it turns out when you threat model out elections, the application of these areas is very, very different depending on the country, the culture, and the specific historical circumstances around that specific election. And so while our solutions to these issues are going to have to be customized for each of the dozens of elections that we are looking to protect in 2018, the overall framework is going to be more or less the same. And that is going to include these 5 big areas of work. And this work is driven not just from what we learned in the US in 2016, but what we've learned in Germany, in France, in Italy, in other countries where we have actively moved to understand and to stop any kind of election interference. So the first thing we're doing is we're building unprecedented transparency into our ads products. And this is not just important to try to surface advertisements that might be run by organized groups or foreign groups who are trying to influence election, but to encourage legitimate actors in an election, campaigns, parties, candidates, to run ads that they're proud of, and not to run ads that are deceptive or divisive that then they target to a very small number of people. So as we've announced before, all advertisers are going to have to go through a process before they're allowed to run any kind of political ad. And that authorization is going to include them submitting documentation to us about their identity, for us checking information around their payment information, and for us doing the work that we feel helps us be comfortable that we can then expose via the Facebook page that belongs to that group of who they really are. By June, electoral and issue ads are all going to then be archived into a single public searchable place. And in that archive, you will have the ad text and image, but you will then also have metadata, such as the amount of ad spend, who saw it, the demographic audience targeting, information like that that will help people understand what was the goal of this ad. And it's important to note when we talk about political ads, we're not just talking about what people term electioneering, which is your traditional vote for Sally or vote no on Measure A, that kind of direct ad that tells people how to vote. But we're talking about any ad that touches a politically divisive topic. And by taking that really broad view, our hope is that we're able to catch all of the kind of behavior that we saw in 2016 in the US and that we've seen in a couple other countries since. While we're focused on preventing bad use of advertising in the platform, we're also trying to encourage good use of our platform to increase the engagement between voters and candidates and parties. And so this is one of the tools that we've built to do that. It's called Town Hall. And when you use Town Hall for the first time, you give it a little bit of information about where you live, and it will tell you these are the people that represent you and allow you to reach out to them directly. And this is the kind of like authentic civic engagement that we think demonstrates the value of social media and provides a capability for people to interact with their elected representatives that didn't really exist before the advent of social media. We also then have dedicated teams whose job it is to find and shut down organized disinformation actors. So rather than waiting for reports from the community saying, we think there's something wrong with this, we have these teams out there going out, using machine learning, using a variety of tools to go find these networks and shut them down. An example of this that we've talked about a number of times is the Internet Research Agency of St. Petersburg, Russia. Last year, we announced what we had found, what activity of theirs we had found in the 2016 election and our actions against them. And then in April of this year, we took down clusters of accounts that, from an outward perspective, looked not at all related to IRA activity, but that we were able to technically tie together to the same people and systems that had run those advertisements in the US 2016 election. Now, in this case, those sites were mostly Russian language, and they were mostly targeted at Russia domestically, as well as what Russia considers their near abroad, like the Ukraine, former Soviet states where they have large Russian-speaking populations. But I think it's an interesting demonstration because, one, it shows us that these disinformation actors don't only have one goal. They are running farms that have the ability to operate in multiple languages around the world and whose goal is to target both domestic and foreign politics. But also, it demonstrates that our goal around protecting elections is not just protecting elections against outsiders, but making sure the behavior inside of countries is authentic, and that participants in those elections are following our rules around authenticity. Another set of work that we're doing is to attack the false news ecosystem. It turns out the vast majority of fake news content that you see is not driven from politically motivated actors, but is driven from financially motivated groups. These are often the same kind of people we've been dealing with for years, who have been pushing spam and other kinds of scams on top of Facebook. And we have a large team who's thinking about the ways that we can discourage this behavior and shut it down. So that means removing content. So when content violates our policies or actors violate our authenticity policies, we remove it. We're reducing the spread of problematic content, which includes the work of third-party fact checkers. And then we're also building products that provide additional context for people, especially in a situation where there's a disputed fact. Now, this is a really big, complex area, and if you're interested in it, I do recommend you go right after this talk to 220A, and you can see Tessa and Greg go into great detail about the work we're doing around attacking fake news and making the newsfeed experience much more trustworthy and authentic. All of this activity is often backed by fake accounts, by networks of accounts that are not tied to real people's identities. This is an example of groups of disinformation actors that we found during a recent European election, and that we are able then to technically tie together. What you're seeing here are groups of accounts that are being run by small numbers of people. And then those accounts are running many, many pages that are pretending to be completely separate news organizations, NGOs, groups of concerned citizens, and then are running large numbers, or pushing a large amount of content, and in this case, mostly pushing people to clicking on links that make them ad money. Down here, you can see one of the largest clusters where a very small number of people were representing themselves as a large number of actors on Facebook. So this is work that has traditionally been done manually, that we've had human beings have to go search through, look for weird behavior, investigate deeply before we take action. But the other thing we're trying to do is to scale up this capability so it happens on an automatic basis much more quickly. And that's why we are using machine learning as the technology to provide that scaling capability on top of our really well-trained and aggressive analysts. Recently, we announced that we have introduced new machine learning algorithms that have been trained off of that manual work that has been done by the analysts. And what we've been able to do with that is, in the course of a couple of months, we were able to shut down 500,000 accounts that were involved in scams. And then every day, we shut down millions of accounts that are attempted to be created to do all kinds of bad things on Facebook. And this protects elections, but it protects a lot of other things. It turns out, when you look at all of the different kinds of abuse on Facebook, the vast, vast majority of that abuse is conducted by accounts that are not tied to somebody's real identity, which makes sense when you think about it. And so when we do these investments in groups, and especially in systems that can operate at scale, we raise the bar for our adversaries, and we lower the amount of abuse across all types across Facebook every day. But even with all these efforts, the most well-meaning and well-resourced team would not be able to act alone. And that's why we are building relationships around the world to help us do a better job here. We are reaching out to academics who study misinformation. We are working with our partner tech companies so that we can share data and that we can act against adversaries in a coordinated manner. We're working with NGOs who specialize in child exploitation. And we're working with government representatives who want to protect their own elections from interference. the truth is there's no magic solution to these problems. I wish I could come up here today and say we have it all solved. But we're not going to allow the challenge to paralyze us. And that's why we're going to continue to engage with people on the outside who can help point out to us the places where we've made mistakes, and then hopefully have some suggestions of how we could do better next time. Some examples of that: last week, we organized the first Fighting Abuse at Scale conference up in San Francisco. This is actually part of a series of conferences we run, the at-scale conferences. There's been security at scale, spam fighting at scale. But this is the first one that looked at all kinds of abuse. And we were really excited to see over 100 companies send about 500 engineers, data scientists, product managers, ops specialists, and others to come talk about how we're all fighting abuse at incredible scale. The energy at these events is really fantastic, because when you meet with people who care deeply about the security and safety fields, it really helps you understand how important it is that we work together. We're all facing the same adversaries. We're all facing some of the same problems. The bad guys in some cases are working together. We need to work together as well in the tech industry. We don't only work with other companies, obviously. We're working with NGOs and academics and government agencies. I'm really personally proud to be an advisor to the Defending Digital Democracy Project at the Belfer Center at Harvard. This is a bipartisan project that is looking at what happened to the US election in 2016 and is trying to think about how do we harden our elections against attack. And when they look at elections, they don't only look at the operations that happen on social networks, but they are really concerned about direct attacks against election infrastructure. These are the first 3 outputs of the group. These are playbooks that are meant for state and local election officials, that are meant for campaigns, for people who might come under direct attack to influence an election. And I've been able to see these be put in place. About a month ago, I was really privileged to be able to go to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they had a conference there where they had representatives of 39 states come, and they ran a big simulation of what would it look like to have a nationwide attack against our election. And that included fake news and social media attacks, as well as direct simulated attacks against election infrastructure. And it was really amazing to see how quickly everybody adapted. That was security and IT leaders from secretaries of state's offices, CIOs from county election officials, the representatives from the Department of Homeland Security. And it was incredible to see these people working together. It was also a little frightening, honestly, because you meet with these folks and you realize these are really smart, well-meaning people who never expected this to be their job, right? When they signed up to run the IT for a county in a swing state, they were not considering the possibility that they would have to stand up against attack from a professional intelligence agency like the GRU or the SVR. And so when you meet with these folks, you are really inspired by their dedication, and it also really demonstrates that we in the tech industry need to do more to help them. Those of us who have had to fight against these adversaries for years, we have a responsibility to learn what we have shared and to provide direct technical assistance where appropriate to make sure elections can't be directly attacked. We're also trying to expand the opportunities academics have to work on election protection. We recently announced an initiative to find ways that we can share data in a privacy-preserving manner with academics who are studying activity on Facebook during the election. So as some of you have probably heard, we've recently had some issues that have come out of sharing data with academics, but we're not going to let that stop us, right? It is critically important that we let academic groups understand what is happening in a country during an election, and to be able to point out to us situations that they think that are worrying that we should dive into. And so we are looking for ways that we can do so while also preserving the privacy of individuals. This is actually a really interesting area around academic integrity, around data protection, around security technologies, around anonymization. And we're really diving deep into this and trying to move very, very quickly so we can have this up and running for the US election in the fall. I've also been really happy about the response to something we announced in January, the Secure the Internet grants. We've had over 200 academic groups submit proposals for research that is highly practical and that applies to the kinds of issues that we're facing day to day. We're really happy with the quality of those proposals, and we'll be announcing the winners at Black Hat this summer. when we do this work, we also have to build relationships around the world. And frankly, we need to build a more diverse team inside of Facebook that represents the people who we are trying to protect. That is why I'm really, really proud of the work the security team has done to be on the forefront of this. We've done a lot of work to build cybersecurity educational opportunities at diverse schools here in the United States, and then also around the world. These pictures are from a trip I got to take a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, to Rwanda, where in concert with Carnegie Mellon's Africa campus, we were able to meet with students, run a security conference, and then run a hackathon where we asked teams from 10 African nations to think about security problems that are specific to their nation that they would like to explore and think about. That hackathon was really encouraging. When you meet young people who are both really deeply into security and safety, who really believe that they want to apply their skills to making things better in their home country. And that, to me, kind of amazingly, we're able to stay up for 24 hours in a row. I got a nice nap in the middle and work on software all night. It's really encouraging for the future of our industry. And the winning team, they put together in 24 hours, overnight, they conceived of, designed, implemented a prototype of a machine learning-based system to detect financial spam on SMS, which is a serious issue in Africa where there's a lot of money moved over SMS messaging. They built that and demonstrated that and won first place. And we're really actually proud to have them here today. So Rehab, Yvonne, Emmanuel, you guys want to stand up? So these are our winners of our hackathon. We brought them here to meet with our engineers and to meet with the broader community. They are on brand in their Carnegie Mellon shirts. They're supposed to be wearing Facebook shirts, but we won't hold that against them. If you see them walking around, please say hi, talk to them about what's going on in their country, hear about the amazing things that are happening in Africa right now. It's actually quite incredible to go to a place like Kigali and to see the incredible excitement there is for technology, as well as the real understanding of the kinds of impact it can have on their societies. It really does encourage me for the future. If you're interested in this area, and I think we all should be, in the area of building diverse representative teams, I strongly recommend you come back tomorrow and you see Stephanie Seitman's talk. Stephanie is on the security operations team and is doing an incredible job running and coordinating all of these projects. And you'll hear directly from her the kinds of things you can do to build these relationships and to build diverse teams. So we've talked today about the examples of security work we do, the traditional information security to protect our company and to protect the products we ship. We've talked about how we protect people, and we've talked about how we're going to work together with others. These are challenging areas, and I'm not going to say that we don't have more work to do. We have a lot of work to do to understand our responsibility and to live up to that responsibility around the world. But I am encouraged that with the support from the company, from all over, we have teams all over Facebook that care incredibly deeply about this, and with the relationships we're building with groups around the world, that we are going to be able to bend the curve, and that we're going to be able to build the playbook for other companies to follow us, to understand how do you measure and understand your impact at scale, and how do you mitigate any of those risks. I really thank you folks for coming out today. Enjoy the rest of F8. Thank you.